What is going on, people? It is the 17th of April today, 2026. Uh, today I'm going to share some, it's simmered down now, but some bad news. Some definitely bad news, terrible news actually. Um, as you know, I'll go through the exact things that I'm doing. I just want this video to be able to explain everything that's going on, and obviously the main point which I want to talk about is I've had to give back three properties. Um, I had to give them back literally yesterday, which is, as you know, an absolute killer. Well, you don't know, but you can imagine is an absolute killer. Um, for those people that do the rent to rent strategy, it can be, very scary giving properties back, being that, you've got a lease in place. However, lucky for me, I had a very understanding agent as well as implications in place within the contract. And these were all different agents that basically stated, if the council ever stop paying me money or whatnot, then I have to give the property back. But regardless of that, just because of the pure relationships I've built in order to get these properties, it fucking sucks. Do you know what I mean? Because they've trusted me as a person, to be able to give me this property, and yeah, the money, obviously. But basically, long story short, my council member called me to my council member called me and basically said to me, look, we can't use the properties for temporary accommodation anymore. The reason being is we're not working with private landlords anymore for temp TA. Everything's going to be done through a new system, which is basically a government policy. We have to get all the people outside of TA, and basically you have to apply for a tender. Now, knowing that one of my mentors has got a tender, he's been doing this for 3 years, built a massive, well, not a massive, but quite a big portfolio of properties, working with a few specific councils around like the Essex area. He's been able to win a tender in Oldham for TA being temporary accommodation, getting a nightly rate paid basis, getting a nightly rate paid accommodation. Um, yeah, but because he's built that recognition, and the people applying for it are massive companies, and such. So yeah, it's a bummer financially. It's a bummer relationship wise, and on top of everything, my biggest fear is not knowing where I'm going in life, or not having not having something in the future. My biggest fear is to be able to is working, and have nothing to show for it. And that adds to the fear now of shit, maybe this strategy isn't as, concrete as I thought it was. Maybe this, maybe that. And, I just want to come down to I want to obviously talk about mainly what I've learned from this, because ultimately, it is what it is. I can't do anything you know, other than give the properties back as soon as possible, look at the ways to move forward, and well, accept what has happened. It's a it's hit to my ego as well. And there was a part of me that said, well, just a human part of me that said, oh, maybe I shouldn't make a video on this, but I need to, for me to be able to look back in the future. For anyone else out there that's doing the same strategy, or that's looking for a bit of motivation, or currently going through a tough time or maybe a similar time, you know this because I know I felt better knowing that this has happened to other people. And so I instantly, as soon as I know my mentor had a call session, I went and spoke to him about the situation, and he kind of eased the way I was thinking. He was like, look, yeah, obviously it's terrible, there's no lie there, but I've been through the same ringer as you. I've had much more losses, so don't even think about that. Just keep moving forward. And and through this process of nearly a year doing this, I have got into a position where, I never thought I'd be able to get into. Obviously, this is something that you can't plan for, because you ultimately can't make this shit up. I had numerous meetings. I can't even put a number on it, but I'd say in the region of like 15 or more, with this specific council, of just back-to-back meetings, questions, this and that, and then to be able to, get this, shut down within 2 months after spending this amount of money on it, it sucks. And the money is kind of my least of my worries, because I always said worst comes to worst. Well, I did my I looked at it financially, and I said, okay, well, I'm still making around, I think, 2,800, 2,700, which is still, good amount of money each month. Obviously, it's not what I was on, but it's still a good amount. And yeah, losing these free properties, to be able to come right back down, it's like shit. But before I'm all over the place. But yeah, the fact that I was able to get into this position in the first place is, extraordinary. Um, it's extraordinary, and I have to pat myself on the back for that. You need to be able to count your wins as well as your losses. Is that even wait? Is that even a what count your losses? Is that even a phrase? I don't even know why I said that, but yeah, you need to be able to count your wins. It's easy to be able to look at, oh shit, this has happened and this is bad, but what have you managed to be able to do that not other people have not been able to do? And I don't necessarily like to compare myself to other people, but I'd say with people within my industry, because I'm all about working hard. But if there's one thing that I've learned, it's about working smart. And so today, um, I'm glad that I shared this, but I also want to be able to share about my plan moving forward, what I've learned, well, what I've learned from this, and my plan moving forward. So, um, basically, within the strategy of social housing, being a private landlord, there's pretty much only four things. Well, there's five things you're really able to do, but it's subjective to obviously what you want to be able to do. But being a private landlord working with social housing, there's five things that you could do. There's emergency accommodation and there's temporary accommodation. That's two. Emergency accommodation is very lucrative, but also very risky. And temporary accommodation is in the same realm, because essentially, emergency is temp, but temp's just a longer term period. Because so the way it works is someone's homeless today, they go to emergency accommodation, and emergency is normally hotels like Airbnbs. So the council will spend loads amount of money, like £100 a night, £200, well maybe not 200, but however much it costs just to be able to throw them in the hotel. And then after that, they put them in temporary accommodation, which is still expensive, but working with providers like myself, it can be cheaper and it's long term, and they still pay nightly rates. So I know people that do emergency accommodation, and I heard it works. But for me personally, especially not with temp being like this already, to be able to now do it with emergency accommodation, have a lease for however long, the lease would very much have to be on a monthly basis. Um, and it's not to say that's impossible, but we're looking for things that are longevity. Do you know what I mean? When I started this business, I said I want something that brings me money monthly, and that's in a sense sustainable. And temporary accommodation, that should be on paper more sustainable, because they're moving in there, they stay there for a couple of months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, depends on the council, depends on the situation. Because obviously the council, they're struggling to be able to put things on ASTs. So obviously I don't know the actual ins and outs of it, but I can imagine that basically the housing associations or whatnot, the bigger companies, are building properties or renting properties for social housing rates, LHA maybe a little bit more, and then that's how the councils are able to put the people in. But that's over time, and that's slow compared to what they have to deal with right now. And so that's why the other strategy, which I'm going to talk about, is house shares, HMOs. Now, this is something I only learned about recently, and it's not a slept on strategy, but I've definitely never heard of many people doing it. But it's basically working with licensed HMOs, but mainly 3 beds to 4 beds and 4 bed HMOs in non-Article 4 areas. And essentially, what you're doing is you're putting in people that are on LHA rates. I mean, well, sorry, you're putting in their clientele, specifically a specific clientele, so ex-offenders, asylum seekers, homeless, whatever it might be, on a shared house basis. And the council are work, and you want to be able to work with the council for people that are eligible for the 1 bed rate, and that mainly applies to people that are either over 35 or have been homeless for 3 months, because the shared rate is quite low compared to the 1 bedroom rate. And so with that, you're able to get the 1 bed rate, times that by 52, times that by four, because if there's four people, and then divide it by 12, and that will give you a monthly total income. And then also what the council I'm doing works with, does that with, that I've been recently, accepted for, which again is a plus side to things, but Article 4 came into place this year. However, I do feel like they're still accepting HMOs just on the sly. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'll explain that in a bit. Um, and also the tenants pay a top up as well every single month. So £75, £50. Of course, this is all negotiable with the councils, and not every council is going to accept this, but also don't be afraid to be able to ask them, because if you ask, you don't get, and if you set and you want to start high anyway, so if they say, oh, that sounds okay, but we can do this, and then you're working your way down. So yeah, it's if they're able to do the top up, and then on top of that, the council pay the deposit and a couple months upfront rent, you're living, because you're able to make your margin. You might make £400, £500 on a HMO basis, but it's something that's guaranteed in a sense, because they're able to fill it straight away. The universal credit can pay you directly, so you don't have to deal with private tenants. The only things that the tenants do have to pay you is their top up out of their own money. So in a sense, it can be more guaranteed. Obviously, problems can happen, but if you're able to negotiate and put them on excluded licenses, it'll be a lot easier. And obviously, if they're paying you that incentive or the deposit and upfront rents, it can recoup the money for furnishings. So that's something that I've only just recently learned, and it's something that's been around for ages. But this is why I'm not an advocate for it. It's not what you it's not what you know, it's who you know. Because I understand it. If there was a group of 5 people and everyone was doing the same thing, what would stand out is based on who they know, because who they know is going to be able to distance themselves from the other people. But in the grand scheme of things, it is about what you know. Because if I knew these things, I always say I kick myself, but there's no point kicking yourself. I always say, if I knew these things ages ago, then I'd be a lot more successful than I am now. I'd fucking hell, heck, mate, I'd be, I'd be booming, because I would have known TA back then. I would have started back then. This thing right here would have never happened. House shares I would be able to do. Article 4 wasn't in place, but I know in 10 years' time, someone else in my position is going to be like, damn, I wish I was in his position. And then the other thing, so those are three things. The other thing is family houses, or individual lets. Now, this is very, very subjective. I've talked about how all these are subjective to whether you get taken, but pretty much every council will want to work with you on AST families. The problem is not every council is LHA is not far off the market rate. You want to be able to work with a council where the LHA rate is not too far off the market rate, and essentially all you're asking is them to be able to top it up. And you basically want to have it's all about airtight relationships as well. But I know my mentors getting anywhere between a £200 and £300 margin, maybe a little bit less. On properties, what ideally about 200, 250, because you are taking care of the maintenance. What if they stop paying rent? Blah, yada, yada, yada. And essentially, they look at the tenant's affordability rate and they think, okay, well, can they afford this long term? The council might be able to top it up for themselves for 6 to 12 months. That I know, someone that's had a block of flats in Bury, that Bury topped it up for 12 months, £200 per flat to be as an incentive, and they had 6 flats, which obviously is really good. But that's subjected to every council, and the rates can't be ridiculous. You might have to negotiate them down. But then again, it's working with councils where there's no harm in asking the question, and if they say no, fairs. But it's mainly working with councils where the LHA rate is not ridiculously off from the market rate. So yeah. And then the other one is tenders. And now tenders are very hard to be able to get into, because tenders are essentially subjective, and most of the time a lot of big people work with them. So I'll speak a lot about my mentor, but I mentioned at the start how the council are moving to tenders. You have to win the tender, you have to bid, and you have to have everything in place, and it can be very subjective. So that's what I've learned, and the reason why I'm explaining that is because I want to reflect obviously what I've learned. And when you first start a strategy, you don't necessarily know everything towards it. But I believe now in this position, I know everything towards this specific strategy of social housing. And so, what am I going to do moving forward is the question. First of all, um, I need to be able to be thankful that I have gone through this stage now to be able to be in this position where I can understand what I need to be able to do next. I always say if there's something to be able to look forward to, if there's a path to be able to go, then you're okay. Because shit like this, it happens, and it's happened to numerous amounts of people. Some worse, a lot worse. I can imagine a lot worse has happened to people, where they have to go bankrupt and they think it's all over. But it's how do you come out of that, which is the real difference. I could have got a normal job or done whatnot and not had this risk, but I can always go back and do that. Yes, I've lost money, but money can always recoup as long as, well, not even as long as, obviously there's no need here to spend ridiculous amounts of money, but I am in probably my debt by 7 grand now. I will recoup that money over time. But it's about what's next. And so, and my properties are still profiting. I still have 6 properties. There is a bit of scarcity with my other temporary accommodation properties. I'm not gonna lie, as my representative left, which I explained. So as you can see, temporary accommodation um, isn't as yippee yay as everyone would think it is. Not only is it hard to be able to, and this is what I loved about my mentor explaining it. And this is not a mentor about the people that create the program. It's someone that got successful within doing it that explained this to me. This is why it really resonates with me, and I truly understand it and accept it because it's coming from a point of view of someone that's actually done the work themselves. And it's not to say that the mentors haven't done it, but they've done something similar and created a course to be able to do it within. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, so it's like there's no contract in place with temporary accommodation unless you win a tender. And so the council can very much just give these properties back whenever. And so it's very scary understanding this because, you've got these properties, the council can literally come back and take them away. And, my new member, he seems like a guy that's just trying to do his job, of course. I'm always under this pressure that I need him to love me, and I would like that to be able to happen, but that takes over time. And it's just an overthinking factor, and I need to send some certificates over. He needs to inspect the property to make sure it's safe and fit for the person. And so that's another thing that I'm mindful of and a bit, frankly, quite nervous, quite scared. But what I've learned is there's no point being scared. There's no point being stressful because whatever will happen will happen. Fate will happen inevitably. And it does suck, but you never know. I might keep these properties. I might build a great relationship with this guy and move forward. Worst case, yes, I do have to give all the properties back. But what have I learned from it? Well, I've learned from it that temporary accommodation is something that I don't want to completely discharge, is that the word? But if I was ever going to do it again, if I ever did get the chance to be able to work with another council or the current council that I'm working with for that method, then it would be one, recoup all my money, then go to the next one. So at least then you're not missing out on anything instead of rather me moving up and then moving up because you can literally take on 2 in 1 month, and, I was using that overdraft to be able to do so. It does seem like, it did seem like the right thing to be able to do. Especially, again, I mentioned my mentor, when he started in the time, he was doing the exact same thing. Scale, scale, scale. A lot of people scale, man, but it can lead you into, a massive problem, massive debt. And it seems good on paper, it sounds good for everyone else, but the strategy in which we deal with, where we're leasing properties and we're having this money in place, it can cause a real problem. Compared to other people that are taking fees, management fees and stuff like this, or taking upfront money, so the risk is a lot less. So yeah, let me keep going. So house shares, that is something that I 100% want to be able to do. Article 4 is more into place now, and HMOs is something that I disregarded, if that's the right word, as a professional basis. Because working with licensed HMOs, here's the thing, right? As much as I'm chasing sustainability, I'm also chasing scalability. I want to be able to scale. And as much as everyone's biggest problem is, how do I learn this? What I'm scared about, what might happen. Um, I don't exactly know. I don't have the time. My biggest worry is none of that. I'm completely fine with all of that. Is, can I scale though? Can I scale? And working with providers, which is actually a sixth point I forgot to mention. Working with the registered providers and becoming a middleman in between is something that I did for a long period of time, and came to the conclusion that it is a waste of time, because you can do this forever, but you know, a lot of providers will take the piss. And so, as much as I can bring as many properties as possible and they can say, yay, we'll take it, a lot of times they don't take it. And, I've experienced that firsthand. So, um, house shares. Mainly 3 beds to 4 beds and 4 bed HMOs in non-Article 4 areas is ideally what you want to be able to work with. And that's what I think right now. Of course, you know, ex-offenders can be a problem. They can be a problem, but everything has its downside. Everything has its downside, and so that is the biggest downside here. But if you're able to get the right incentives, and this is the thing, you want to be able to send mass emails out, which I'm doing, to every single council, so that you have the biggest opportunity to be able to do this. Ultimately, the property game that I'm aware of in the rent to rent strategy should be different things that you're able to put into place to be able to make as much money as possible. And so it's understanding, do you know this strategy? Yes. Can you use this strategy alongside this strategy to be able to have two different strategies? Yes. So and that's the beauty of it. So house shares, amazing. The family houses, I'm still going to ask the question for every council that I get into, and if not able to top it up, if there's no margin to be able to work with, that's fine, move on. But this is something that I can't work with for the rest of my life. So my next point forward is to work with house shares and temporary accommodation still, however, being very mindful of it. Um, either on a flip side of my personal finances, there's and I've got to sit on this for maybe a day or so, maybe 2 days. I'm 100% happy to go back to work and get a part-time job, to be able to fund my expenses while I continue going. But I've also started a short-term rental cleaning company, which you may know. And so I've got my first clean on Sunday. I'm not doing it myself. I've got the cleaners there. And there's a massive, I believe, opportunity to be able to scale speaking to these people. And so I believe it's not so much the clients to be able to get, but it's to be able to make a suitable margin. And of course, if people are, taking the piss or whatnot, about not turning up, then obviously that's the biggest problem. But if I'm able to create a business out of this, then there's no reason to be able to go back to work, because the money that I'm getting right now, as much as I'd like to save some of it and build up my finger, this could be the replacement for that part-time job, especially if I'm able to scale it and make a lot more money. And well, obviously the idea is to be able to turn it into 100,000 or whatever, a million, whatever. And I need to use this opportunity now to focus on this for now. My life is risk. I take maximum risk, and I do it because I know I can do it. Like I just said, I got to 9 properties. Yes, it failed because ultimately I didn't build a strong foundation, but I've learned from it, and now I'm going to keep going forward. There's also, lease option, which is something to be able to look into. No harm in doing that. And there's also another strategy, which is, I'm not going to explain. I'm going to keep this one to myself. But I know a few people that have it. I know a close friend of mine that has it. But it's basically a fine line between legal and not illegal in an immoral sense, but definitely not. I mean, well, we've had councils come out and inspect them and stuff like that and been completely fine. But it's definitely something that shouldn't be praised. But you can make a lot of money of it. You're not doing anything immoral. You're just bending the rules, should I say. So that's something that I'm potentially thinking of. Because, to be able to follow the rules in a world where there's cheaters, everyone's bending the rules in every single business category. There's things that people know that others don't. People do it within the social housing industry. People do it wherever. And it's not to say that those people are necessarily bad. If there's an opportunity to be able to do something and not get caught, hey, do it. That's what I feel like. And everyone's like, oh, you've got to be moral and stuff like that. There's literally people born to rich families in, that do not have to worry about money. And I know that's an extreme example, but even if people were born into families where they understand this, they're gonna have a massive head start. So you need to do what the fuck you can do in order to be successful. Or else if you try and be nice and everything, think about managers, for example. Why is it that all of us hate our managers most of the time? Or managers are always seen as that bad guy, and the higher up the chain you get, the more rude or how they come across is not the best, and these type of guys, but they're making more money because they have the ability to be able to become that person. They have the ability not to be able to be liked by anyone. They might have to cut a few corners and stuff like that, to be able to be successful. If a king wants to be able to grow, he's got to sacrifice his troops, and that's the immoral thing, but everyone ultimately understands when they actually think about it. So what that needs to be done. I hope that makes sense. Um, and then the one thing that I'm going to do as well is to become my own social housing provider. Now, this is something that I've got to look into, but I asked, I've still got to be able to, have a bit more research. But again, going back to my mentor, because this is all on a call that I spoke to him about. He was like, being your own social housing provider, and I know that's a big, wide range term. So it's dealing with either supported accommodation, supported living, and there's a few other strategies. And then there's a few other things which you can do, which is not on the housing side, but more so like care agency, blah blah blah. It's coming to terms with is it viable? And when we look at what's the net what's always going to be around, people talk about, oh, AI creation, I'm going to do AI and stuff like that. One thing for me that is never going to go out is care. My mum's a social worker, and she's had plenty of interviews. They're always looking for social workers. They're always looking for NHS. They're always looking for the reason being is because as the world grows, there's going to be more and more vulnerable people every single day. And so why limit myself? And I had this discussion with myself and the mentor and everyone. The mentor that actually created the program did this himself. Now, of course, he did this in a time where it wasn't as red tape, because it is hard. I think the process was like 9 months to a year if you're lucky, and it is subjective. But I work with the council, I work with properties, I work with people, vulnerable people. If I'm doing this anyway, then why not go full out and give myself the most opportunity as possible? Knowing what I know now, there's room to be able to scale. If there's room, which there is, it's not saturated. That you can make rates on it, you can make margins on it. There's no reason to why you can't do it, and it's going to be a case of managing it. Cool, absolutely. But then at least I know there's going to be a more stricter, more better foundation than rather taking the easy route. Or this is because with what I'm doing right now, it's not the easy route per se, because it still is hard, but it definitely is the route that's um how do I say, not as intense. And I'm an advocate for that. That's one thing that my mindset has completely changed with, was thinking it has to be hard. It does not have to be hard. It could be as easy or as simple as you want it to be able to be. But when situations like this arise, where that easy route has now it can't come to terms with why it's easy, easy, it really does put you in a perspective of, okay, well, how do I build my foundation stronger? And so those are the next things for me to be able to do. And before I jump into all these things, there is obviously things that I have to be able to do, which unfortunately, give the property back, which I've just done, but get rid of the bills and stuff like that, and stuff like that. But before I jump straight into it, I need to be able to sit down and relax. For the past 3 years straight, 3.5 years, I've done nothing but grind. And I'm not one of these type of guys that catch a break type of shit. But, I need to be able to give myself that time to be able to process exactly what is the next best thing to be able to do. And that normally comes after a world of stress, and then enabled to be able to look back. But now this is a big change in my life, which I'm going to be able to do, and hopefully for the better. Well, it is for the better regardless, because there is a way to be able to move forward. And I just know that in 5 years' time, because you can't change fate. What is will be. But I'll be able to look back and say, man, thank God I did this. Thank God I did this. And to be able to add to this as well, I'm talking just briefly about the property thing like that, but there's also a big part of me which I don't know exactly how to explain, but wants to be more than just business. I always talk about being great, leaving something behind, not just on the property side, but I think about YouTube, and I know these are all cliches, and it's not to say, and people probably say, "Oh, Han, like chill out now. You got such a good thing going for you. Don't think all YouTube because everyone's trying to do that." But just let me think for a sec. And it's like YouTube, acting, singing, other business things. What's the next best thing? I want to be great. I want to be that type of guy that someone looks at and be like, I want to be like him. You know, um, because I'm chasing that guy. I'm chasing that guy, that ideal, the guy that I want to be able to be. And I want to be all these different things, but at the same time, I need to be able to enjoy the things that I have around me now. I need to be able to enjoy life. I don't want to bring this video for too long, but I'm glad that I've got everything out of the way and I'm confident. But there was an anime called Berserk. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. And just quickly, long story short, there was a guy that had the ambition, wanted to be able to achieve a kingdom, strive to be able to get it, had a massive downfall, and oh, my mate's calling me, I'll call him back. Had a massive downfall, and was offered an opportunity to be able to have everything he wanted in order to give his soul. And once he did it, obviously the story's not finished, but as you can imagine, everything he had was when he was with his guys, living life, enjoying life, and he sacrificed it all for nothing. Because when you reach that kingdom, you're going to be there saying, now I'm here, what's next? Not knowing that the things that actually made you happy were going out with my friends, speaking to them on these games. What actually makes me laugh, because when I've had this money, when I was making this amount, there was no part of me that wanted to be able to buy clothes. It was just to invest. And it's celebrating those small wins and enjoying yourself that really make a difference. And really allow you to be able to have a good life. So I'm really trying to say yes to more things, trying to do things that I enjoy. Of course, it is hard because being in the life that we're in now, having to work and stuff like that, which is definitely not something I want to be able to do. But I mean, in sense of 9 to 5 and stuff like that. Well, not even that, just like these shitty jobs that you have to do. But yeah, I'm glad I made this video. To myself in 5 years' time, thank you for keep going. Don't forget where you came from. Don't forget how hard it was for yourself to be able to do it, and make sure you're honest with other people as people has been honest with you. And enjoy your life and don't stress too much. Thank you very much.